The first thing that I would suggest is switching to a plant-based diet. And that could be triggering for some people. The reason why I really, especially if it's something serious like cancer or anything at that level, because you want to give the body the most easily digestible food, something that's going to penetrate and nourish your system. And in order to do that, you need hydration. So first of all, we are severely dehydrated, and this is a problem across the world. But in America, you're probably talking more than 70% of people are dehydrated severely. So if all of your healing and all the processes the body uses to keep you stable and support your immune system is hinged on hydration, and we're all severely dehydrated, the body really just doesn't have the resources it needs to start this process. So by starting with hydration, and the one thing that we were taught, because we deal with a lot of propaganda in our country, in America, but one thing we were taught is that, you drink your 8 glasses of water a day or whatever that is. No one even said how much water that actually is. Like, what is a glass of water? But what I learned is that you actually get better hydration through eating your water.
Hmm.
So I'm going to promote, plant-based foods because it's the best source for hydration. If you eat a watermelon is, 90 to 95% water, cucumber, similar numbers, apples, oranges, things of that nature. But I don't want to confuse people because most people think that fruit is all sweet, but that's just more propaganda. Fruit is the ovaries of a plant. So you can also include avocados, which aren't sweet at all, and they're very fatty, good fats, zucchinis and butternut squash, and all these other things. So if it has a seed in it, it will be considered the ovaries of a plant, and that's going to have a tremendous amount of hydration, easy for the body to digest. Even if you go to the store and it's hard to find the organic stuff, or even if your organic stuff has a coating on it, your boy Bill Gates is putting the appeal coating on as much fruit and vegetables as he can right now. It's still going to be better than eating a Snickers bar because Snickers bars are calorically dense. They're highly processed foods. They're not even really technically food. There's no food product in it. It's a chemical food, and it's calorically dense. So that's hard for the body to digest. There's no nutritional value. It's going to actually remove water from your system. So it's going to give you all the negative things with none of the positive. So even if you feel it, don't get overwhelmed with trying to find the perfect food source. Just start with plant-based foods. And I would say just eat it more often than you eat the other stuff. Like that's a great way to start.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. So one problem with fruits and vegetables, and that we are plant based. I mean, the only thing we eat outside of plant based is once every 2 weeks or so we have fish, and that's primarily for our daughter, just because she had allergies, so she couldn't eat a lot of the foods that like nuts and things like that. So we had to find
Mhm.
some source of protein. So we did, and we never do farm raised. It's always just natural
Wild caught.
salmon. But fruits are tough. It's like you go out, let's say you're going grocery shopping. A lot of people go grocery shopping once a week and you buy fruits. By the end of the week, they're going bad, if you don't eat them all. And it's tough to just want to eat fruits and vegetables every day, all day, because to be honest, well, I just had an apple before we started this, it doesn't really fill you up. How do you train yourself to actually not be hungry when you're eating properly and you're doing a plant-based diet? Because I know that's a big thing with a lot of people that try to go plant-based, is they're just always hungry. Is that just our minds playing tricks on us, or what is it? Are we actually not getting the nutrients our body wants, so it's always seeming like we're hungry? Because I know I've faced this. If I eat just fruits and vegetables, it just seems like you eat it, you're hungry 10 minutes later, and your body's saying, I want more, I want more. Is that because we're not drinking and we're drinking too much coffee, or I don't know. I don't know what's the answer to that.
Yeah, good question. It's funny that you mentioned drinking too much coffee. So oftentimes we don't interpret the signals from the body properly. Once again, propaganda. We've been trained to believe certain sensations are what they are not. So for example, this whole what we would consider a hunger pang or just feeling hungry is just we don't understand what the body's doing. There's a chemical, it's a digestive fluid, and it does other things, but it's called ghrelin, and the body uses it in preparation for digesting food. So that sensation that we get, that we think, oh, this means it's time to eat, that's actually the body preparing for you to eat, because this is when you typically eat. So I used to work with a guy who every every day, probably around 11:30, 11:45, he'd stop me, he'd be like, "Hey, Chris, it's almost time for lunch." And we're in construction. We're not on our phones. We don't really wear watches. And I'm like, "How do you always know what time lunch is?" He's like, "My stomach's telling me." And so what that means is we have this amazing internal clock, and the body is very intelligent. It knows you eat at 12 every day. It knows you eat at 8 a.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever your schedule is. So it spikes ghrelin production right before the times you typically eat in order to get ahead of the game, if you will, right? To just be more efficient. So one of the things I actually teach people is how to do like preparation for either fasting or, even in this case, dietary change. And what you do is you slowly decrease the frequency that you eat. And when I say the frequency, I'm talking about every time you put something in your mouth, you're eating, you're digesting. Even if it's gum and you don't swallow it, you're still starting that digestive process, and that causes the body to spike ghrelin. So you have to basically train yourself to not have those spikes all the time. And then also the intensity of the spike is going to be based on what you're eating, right? So if it's got to digest a steak, the spike is going to be much higher than if it's going to digest an apple. And so consistency and discipline is important to get your body to a place of normalcy, because I used to be just like you, right? But now I literally go all day and I don't eat. That's my normal thing. I typically don't put a morsel of food in my mouth until probably after 4 p.m. most days. And oftentimes I'll just eat once a day and I'm completely satiated. I don't even think about food before. I mean, it's pretty early right now, but 4 or 5 hours from now, I ain't even thought about food. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I have done that. So, I've done so many of these. They're not diets, because I'm not really trying to lose weight, but just so many things, because I get so busy during the day that I truly don't have time to eat. So I've got this all natural protein, and all this stuff. I don't even know what half of it is, amino acids and everything else. Like this right here, this is warm water with beets, ground up beets mixed in with it, and I'm always just trying to do, like you said, is just curb that feeling of hunger. But most people aren't me or you, where they just want to go get a steak, they want a burger, they want a quick fix. What are some of the things, if folks don't make changes, that more than likely could potentially happen if they don't take control of how they're eating? I mean, what does the science say, or what do statistics say about that? Is there any bona fide statistics that show the difference between plant-based and meats and processed foods?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of science out there. Oddly enough, I've never been too interested in like the studies. I'm not like, like a Thomas DeLauren or something like that, where I would go and look at a whole bunch of studies and compare the studies. My goal was always to be boots on the ground, like, what's happening in real life, right? So I could talk about anecdotal evidence, which a lot of people think that anecdotal evidence is a lesser, but it's actually the most important, because in reality, if you're doing a study, you have a controlled environment, you've got all these different factors to make sure that, you could get clear, concise results, which sounds good. But the problem is you've removed that control study from reality, the reality of people's real lives, their real interactions. And so the information is not as accurate, which is why I think we have such a crisis in America. We're not looking at things properly. But the data that I have seen is when people, so first of all, what are some of the issues that you can see just eating a standard American diet? Well, obesity. Technically, we're not the most obese country in the world. It's a technicality, but we basically are the most obese country in the world, right? So, 60+% of our country is overweight. Then you've got a large proponent of those people that are overweight that are in the obese category, right? There's another 60% of people that are in the obese category. What that does is it actually shortens your lifespan. So you mentioned earlier about, the biblical days, how people would live to be 300 years old. I mean, even much longer than that. But we don't even have to go to the biblical days. You could see in the ocean or even in the forest animals that are non-domesticated that are living for hundreds of years, right?
It's
So
true.
the same thing that created that turtle or that, whale created us. Whatever you believe in, whether it's the Big Bang or God, we were all created by the same thing. Why does the turtle get to live to be 2, 3 times as long as us? It's because we are the only creature that's so out of alignment with nature that we are doing things that are completely unnatural. So, heart disease, cancer, obviously, um, diabetes is huge in my community. We're talking like, I mean, it's absolutely devastating how we've built a culture around diabetes. We call it the sugar. And people lose their limbs. So not changing your diet is essentially early death. It's not a high quality of life as you get older. Now, there's always the exceptions to the rule. I do want to say that there are some people that eat whatever, smoke, drink, they do everything, and they live to be 90 plus years old. Don't base what you're going to do with your life off of that exception to the rule. You're going to have a much higher chance of success if you switch to like plant-based. So now what are you talking about? You're looking at better sleep. You're looking at higher cognitive function. As you age, you don't have to worry about those degenerative brain disorders that are becoming so common now with our elders. Imagine making it to 80 years old or even 90, but not remembering what you did yesterday. You can't enjoy your family, the legacy that you built for yourself. You don't get to enjoy it because you're not fully there, or you're on medication, or you're in a nursing home because you don't have mobility. So it's, what I've seen in my community. I've seen people reduce their metabolic age by 5, 10 years, with diet and exercise, fasting. It's really about lifestyle. It's about saying, okay, I'm going to change the environment that I'm interacting in order to, because this stuff is important to me.